A reading from 1 Timothy. Of course, there is great gain in godliness combined with contentment. For we brought nothing into this world, so that we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with these. But those who want to be rich fall into temptation and are trapped by many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, and in their eagerness to be rich, some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pains. As for those who in the present age are rich, command them not to be haughty, or to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but rather on God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, generous and ready to share, thus storing up for themselves the treasure of a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of the life that is really life. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. I was in Madison, New Jersey a few weeks ago, where I was part of an accreditation team for Drew Theological Seminary. And while there, I noticed that there was an abundance of Korean students at this school in New Jersey, at a Methodist school. So I asked about how this came about, and a college administrator pointed me to the courtyard outside where there was a statue of Henry Appenzeller. Appenzeller was a Pennsylvania-born man from a pious German immigrant family who had gone to seminary at Drew in the late 1800s, where he sensed a call to missions. So he and his young wife set out for Korea. And when they got there, they found that there was a law against public Christian witness. And so, plan B, he decided to start a school for boys. This went well enough until he realized that girls in Korea at that time had little opportunity for learning, and so he started girls' schools across the country. He also helped to translate the Bible into the Korean language. Henry was only in Korea for 17 years when, on his way to a Bible translation meeting, he died trying to rescue a Korean girl from drowning. His influence would live on, though. The Methodist Church in Korea is strong even today, and the steady flow of students across the globe to Drew University and its theological school continues. 130 years later now, when Korean students arrive on the campus of Drew University or theological school, the first thing they want to do is go find that statue. They take a selfie with Henry, and they send it back home to say, "See, I'm here." The bishop of the Methodist Church in New Jersey told me while I was there that there are 70 Korean Methodist churches in his state. And the 5 largest Methodist churches in New Jersey are all Korean congregations. Go figure. What a legacy. Henry Appenzeller was the kind of saint even a Baptist could honor. Because Baptist saints are usually missionaries, don't you know? Today is All Saints Sunday in the Worldwide Church, and we remember those faithful Christians who have left a legacy for us to live up to. In one sense, especially in a Baptist sense, all Christians are saints, having been made holy by a holy God. But we all know that some saints are saintlier than others, don't we? And that's due to how they have, during their own lifetimes, allowed God to use them to the point where beyond their lifetimes, they inspire us still. Here then is the question of the day. How do you hope to leave a legacy? Our text from 1 Timothy urges us to store up treasure in heaven by our good deeds. By our good deeds. That sounds rather transactional, doesn't it? Like we can do certain things that will buy us a richer experience of heaven when we die? Like some will be poor in heaven and others rich based on how they invest themselves in this life? Doesn't sound like our doctrine of salvation by grace alone, not works, does it? But Paul isn't talking about salvation in this passage. He's talking to people who are already in the process of being saved by grace. He simply wants them to live in a way keeping with their salvation. This is a wisdom passage. It has to do with how you live your life in a way that allows you to experience what, in that lovely phrase at the end of this text, he says, is that life that really is life. And when you live that grace-filled and graceful way, your life will be a legacy to those who come after you because you put stock in eternal things, not in things that will pass away when you do. This is the idea of storing up treasure in heaven. It doesn't mean that when you get there, you will have a higher net worth than someone else. It means that by giving heaven greater weight in this life on earth, you will allow heaven's blessings upon you to linger on earth long after you are gone. So if you want to leave a legacy, Paul says this begins with cultivating a spirit of godliness with contentment. There is great gain in this, he says, because just as you brought nothing materially into the world when you were born, so you cannot carry with you materially anything when you leave, when you die. We seem to have a hard time believing that, though, if you look at the way we store up treasure on earth. In 1939, French archaeologist Pierre Montet discovered the first tomb of the pharaohs in Egypt that had not already been raided by grave robbers. The so-called Tanis treasure is a cache of gold and jewels that were meant to aid the pharaoh buried in that place on his journey toward immortality that would follow the course of the sun in its daily resurrection. The sun god Ra was said to have had flesh of gold because when you look up in the sky and you see the sun, it looks, well, glittering gold, right? And so the Pharaoh needed to coat himself in gold and surround himself with it in order to become one with the gods and live forever. Obviously, we have a different worldview due to our Christian faith, and yet it seems we too store up for ourselves treasure on earth that we can't take with us to heaven. Now, it's important at this point for me to say that good financial management and estate planning are not ungodly. In fact, they can lead to a godly legacy because saving can be a great means for giving wealth, not just for hoarding it. You build a nest egg by limiting your spending day by day, and many people plan to fail because they fail to plan, right? And the earlier you start saving in your life, the more you will be able to have toward the end of it. Almost magically, compound interest builds wealth over time. But why do we save? What's the why? For many people, it comes from a fear of scarcity, from insecurity about the future, or from a determination that I don't want anyone to have to take care of me when I get older. Right? Two problems with all that. First, the motivation comes from the wrong place when you have already said that you have put all of your faith and trust in God for this life and the next, and God has promised to take care of all of your needs. To accumulate great wealth by storing up treasure on earth, then, you undermine God's promises to you, and you lose out on the joy and freedom that comes from grace. Second, how much is enough? It's not bad to save, but you also must ask about when you have gone beyond the point of a reasonable and simple and sustainable lifestyle. Instead, you may have become possessed by your possessions. The antidote to this is to be content enough with what you have that you can become more ambitious with what you can share. This is how you can even use your money to store up treasure in heaven. Now, earlier I talked about how storing up treasure in heaven was about good deeds, but not about buying your place in the afterlife. But Paul knows that we can actually even use our wealth, our money in this life to leave a legacy when we are gone. We can share with what we have now and after we are gone. And this is legacy giving. One way to do that is to provide for your family when you are gone. Now, we like to talk about how America is a meritocracy, right? About how everyone starts out with nothing and is obligated to try to make something by their own efforts. But leaving enough for your family to strengthen their ability to thrive is not ungodly. Every one of your heirs is not going to be a successful entrepreneur. Hello? And some of them might actually make the decision to become teachers or social workers or, pray God, ministers even, right? Supporting them through legacy giving is an act of love beyond your lifetime. But to do that well, you need a will. There are lots of important things you can settle in the process of planning your estate, including advanced medical directives that will save a lot of money and worry at the end of your life. But while you're at it, you can also leave a legacy gift to your church. Today, we are announcing the formation of the Wilshire Legacy Circle. Here's the way this works. Anyone who leaves a gift of any amount that we will receive after he or she dies will automatically be entered into the Legacy Circle and celebrated as an inductee on the church's anniversary in June each year. Now, I know that sounds odd, that you get recognized only after you die. But that's precisely the spiritual point. Saints aren't sainted until they're gone. And the church isn't here to make a name for people by their giving while they are alive. That would contradict the goal of storing up treasure in heaven. But the only way to join that group when you are dead is to prepare for it when you are alive. And in future years, on All Saints Sunday, when we call the names of those who died as we did today in the last year, we will mark with an asterisk those who have provided for the church in this way, and there will be no levels of giving indicated. This is something Kim and I are doing. We believe in this church. We believe in you. It has shaped our lives and our children's lives for the better. You are our extended family. And by leaving something to Wilshire after we are gone, we are saying that our relationship was not transactional, that it was transformational. It wasn't just about paying for services rendered. It was about giving so that services may be rendered. This isn't about what we want the church to be by our giving. It's about what we want to be by our giving. We have no idea what Wilshire will look like 100 years from now, but we can make it more likely that Wilshire will be 100 years from now. And that's no small thing considering the number of churches that are closing across America these days. But we can ensure a more robust future for one church, for this church. What's your why, we've been asking in this stewardship emphasis. And today, why Wilshire? Well, because it's a church that means something to people near and far, and it means something to you, I'm sure. And that makes it a church worth securing by our giving from generation to generation. Amen.